Well, on that note, what's your view on the recent discussion in the UK um, regarding the potential uh, uh, reinstitution of conscription and the comments coming from senior figures about uh, Britain's armed forces not being ready for war? Do you think that perhaps that's a sign that the wake up call has maybe happened?
Well, I have been played a small part in initiating that discussion, following on General Patrick Sanders' comments about a civilian mobilizing a civilian army, with a letter in the Times, which the Times published last week, saying that now is the time to think the unthinkable and consider conscription. Now, as a professional soldier, my view of conscription was that it was anathema to a professional army. The British Army and Navy and Air Force, but the British Army has a long tradition of long service volunteers, highly professional, with enormous experience, and it has served them exceptionally well. Except, of course, when they were, I'm afraid, the reality of the First and Second World Wars was that the professional army disappeared in was eliminated at first Ypres. Was much of it was put in the bag in the First World War. Much of it was put in the bag and taken prisoner after Dunkirk in the Second World War. And it was ultimately in both conscripts. It was conscript armies which won the war. Um, and when you see a situation where the British Army, as I mentioned earlier, the British Army manning is in free fall, dropping now, well forecast to drop below 70,000, unable to generate the mass required to deliver even a small a division minus for warfighting, unable to recruit because the demographics and the appeal it offers is still not sufficient to persuade young men and women to sign up. How do you attract the manpower? How do you achieve the manpower levels you need? Going back to our comments on deterrence, to demonstrate a credible warfighting military capability, you have to look at all options. And therefore, as I said in my letter in the Times last week, now is the time to think the unthinkable and consider conscription. And there are plenty of good precedents, and people must understand that when I'm talking about conscription, I'm not talking about a sort of 1950s spud bashing, potato peeling, 2 years wasted time sitting in Catterick for a conscript of the 1950s. Although, let's also be clear, a lot of the conscripts fought in places like Korea with great distinction. I'm talking about a model rather like the Finnish armed forces, a small professional body, but universal male conscription, which and a reserve commitment, which allows the Finnish armed forces to go from a professional army of some 20,000 to some 280,000 well-equipped, well-trained soldiers, more than capable of defending Finland and contributing to the NATO alliance. That is the sort of model we should be thinking about. I'm not saying it needs to be done, but the government either has to invest huge amounts in building up a volunteer force or find other ways of doing it. So conscription should not be ruled out.